Hello everyone, welcome to my educational platform. This is going to be a special one. I am glad to say that this interview signifies my very first in-person interview. The person who kindly allowed me this opportunity is Professor Madan Ramroop. Professor Ramroop is a legend of Savile Row. This interview signifies and celebrates 50 years of him being present at Savile Row and Maurice Sedwell Ltd. 50 years of him delivering sartorial excellence since 1974. His journey starts at the age of 17, where by buying a boat ticket for the North Star, he sailed to England. In 1972, he entered the London College of Fashion, and 2 years later, he comes to Savile Row for the very first time in his life. In the same year, he enters Maurice Sedwell Ltd. With a 4-week-long trial. Savile Row, the Mecca of aficionados of bespoke tailoring for more than 300 years, named after the Earl of Burlington's wife, Lady Dorothy Savile. That is enormous pressure for somebody who is new to the field to take. But there it was. Andrew started on a £25 rate per week for a month trial. Now, still, after all those years, after leaving his family, his home village, his home country to chase his dreams, Andrew's life didn't really become easier when he entered Savile Row. He was hired by Anthony Sinclair, but when a white candidate showed up, he was fired within about 20 minutes. When he entered Maurice Sedwell, he was told, "We can't call you that here. We can't call you your name, Madan." So from that point on, he introduced himself as Andrew. But despite the adversity and the challenges Andrew pushed forward, in 1988, he bought Maurice Sedwell Ltd. From that point on, his ultra-bespoke creations have been featured all around the globe. He famously designed the midnight blue cashmere jacket for Princess Diana for her equally famous 1995 Panorama interview. His clientele includes actor Samuel L. Jackson, Tony Curtis, actor Charles Gray, and Alex Turner, lead singer of Arctic Monkeys, among many more royals and celebrities. Professor Ramroop was awarded an Order of the British Empire by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II in 2008. The very first Savile Row Tailor to be awarded the honor, and in the same year he established the Savile Row Academy. Art's Andrew Ramroop Tailoring Standards is a tailoring benchmark for Savile Row and the rest of the world to follow. This interview uncovers Professor Ramroop's journey, the adversity, the challenges, how he forged his legacy and still is forging his legacy, and how a young boy from a small village in Trinidad managed to influence, set the pace and standard of what a sartorial image should be. Professor Ramroop, it was an utter honor. Thank you for the opportunity to meet you. Please consider this interview as a milestone for your 5 decades in Savile Row at Maurice Sedwell, and a wish for many more celebrations to follow.
Having heard of Savile Row, I felt that like a young athlete who wanted to be in the Olympics, win a gold medal, I wanted to be on Savile Row, where the best tailors are, and practice my trade.
My name is Andrew Ramroop of Maurice Sedwell Bespoke Tailors on Savile Row.
And from that point on, you went on to design garments for a lot of well-known personalities, among which was the Princess of Wales, Diana. You know, the very famous Panorama interview in 1995 where we designed her midnight blue jacket. Did you know that your creation was going to be put on national television?
Well, the short answer to that is no.
The Maurice Sedwell signature style curve. The curve meaning that you've got curved lines on the flaps.
I had made myself 2 suits as my calling card. I used one to travel here and I carried the other one. And he liked what I had because I, take my suit around. And he was the first. Actually, Anthony Sinclair was the name of the tailor. And he was Sean Connery's tailor. He was James Bond tailor. And James Bond had his suit made at Savile Row.
So Andrew, it's a complete pleasure to be here today. Thank you for inviting me to celebrate you being 50 years at Maurice Sedwell. You will be closing on 50 years on July 2024. It's a huge milestone for you being at Maurice Sedwell. And in general, Taylor started working in the General Mayfair area in around 1790. Savile Row specifically from 1803. So it's peculiar, how does a person who is a complete foreigner, somebody who is not connected with, professionally or racially, with Savile Row and sartorial elegance, manages to not only establish themselves as a Hall of Fame name in sartorial fashion, but put a dent in Savile Row's 200-year-long history. Would you like to take me back to your birthplace in Mango Village in Trinidad and tell me how you were raised, how you were influenced, and how your dreams started to develop, basically?
Well, first of all, Georgios, thank you very much for coming and agreeing to do this interview. We've spoken before.
Yes.
I've been on your podcast on LinkedIn. And of course, when you contacted me not so long ago, I thought this is a natural way to start with someone whom I'm familiar with, to celebrate what is, 50 years on reflection at Maurice Sedwell, but perhaps looking at it, I think that 50 years went very, very quickly because I don't even feel like 50 years old, whatever that feels like. But winding back to back home, to the foothills of the northern range of mountains in Trinidad, where I came from, we came from very humble beginnings. My father was a very ambitious man in that he wanted us all to be educated, because after I was born in 1952, and in 1962, when I was 10 years old, Trinidad and Tobago got independence from Britain. Now, the new administration felt that it was appropriate that all of the young people became educated. And so high academic attainment was meant to be the natural pathway to success in life. But success was very limited, because you'll go on to school, university was totally out of the question. You'll go on to school, you'll probably pass your common entrance exam, onto college, get 5, the standard was 5 ordinary level, 5 O-level passes, and then get a job as a teller in a bank or get a job as a civil servant or anywhere else that would employ you. So your journey was really to educate yourself, to be of service to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I, at age of 9, had cut up my mother's pillowcase to make myself a pair of trousers. Well, we call them pants. To make a bit, but it looked loosely. You can imagine the frills, and it looks like a pajama. But that was the early beginnings of me wanting to be creative. Quite where it came from, I don't know. I guess it's probably because I wanted to have clothes, and coming from very humble beginnings. I mean, humble is a fancy word for saying you're poor. And at that time, we would probably be described as being poor, because we lived on the hills, we lived really amongst the bushes and the trees. We lived in what was a forest at the time. And we couldn't see the next door neighbor's house because it was so far away, or either down in the valley, or further up the hill, or the other side of the mountain. So that kind of environment, but the beauty about that environment was flora, fauna, sunshine, a lot of greenery, the river, the fishes, the fruits in the trees, Trinidad Carnival. So there were a lot of influences there in color. And it was technically environment to grow up in. You get up in the morning and the birds whistling, you name it. It is officially something like 260 different species of birds in Trinidad. And so all of these lovely sounds that was influencing my subconscious in some way that I didn't understand at the time. And the closest we got to newspapers, I wasn't able to read properly, was the comic strip. And I love reading the comic strip. But there were 3 particular strips in the comic. There was Mandrake, who was a magician that wore a top hat, a cape, white bow tie, white shirt, and dressed tails. He was very, 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 very smartly dressed. And so one of the 3 comics was the Mandrake, and the other, strangely enough, was Dick Tracy. And Dick Tracy carried a raincoat, a trilby hat. He had a very hooked nose. The one thing that Dick Tracy had in the 60s that we now had in the 2000s and in the 21st century, that Dick Tracy had a watch that actually used to communicate like a television screen. Now, isn't that interesting? I'm talking about the 60s. That was one of the comics.
Yes.
And the other one was Phantom. Phantom was like he wore a leotard. He lived in the forest, a bit of a Tarzan.
Mm-hmm.
Phantom was. But I used to draw grids of these 3 comic strips, and then draw a larger grid in a piece of paper, plain piece of paper, and copy, particularly Mandrake, and copy Phantom, but mainly Mandrake, because I love the way he dressed. And that is probably the idea of designing came about and drawing came about. And so at that time, I wanted to leave school. I really wanted to. I was now about 10 years old, and I wanted to leave school. And I wanted to make clothes for myself. Of course, I had to continue at school. And so I was born in November, and I was able to do my 11 plus exam to go on to college and follow the pathway that my parents had wanted us to. But I tried very hard to fail my common entrance exam so that I would not have to go to college and I can follow the career that I wanted to have. But it was very much in silence, because I really didn't want... An 11-year-old now, you don't actually say to your parents, you don't want to continue school.
Yeah, you fear your parents at 11 years old.
It's
normal.
You not only respect them, you absolutely fear them.
Mm-hmm.
You just cannot speak to them in a way that to express what you want to express. You just listen. You do as you're told.
Yeah.
You speak when you're spoken to. Answer when you're called. And so I deliberately failed my common entrance exam. And it's easy to deliberately fail because there was a multiple choice. There was a question, 4 possible answers, A, B, C, or D, and you circle around one. And I went through the exam in no time at all because I circled A's on all of them. And because the chances of all A's being wrong was greater than doing, various options.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was no surprise that I was successful in failing. And so I went on to, I tried to persuade my mother to let me get on to do tailoring. I said persuade my mother, not my father, because my mother was much more approachable. Mommy and I got on really, really well. And so I would speak to Mommy in a way that I could not even contemplate communicating to my father.
I think it's the same with boys and mothers. We can always approach our mom better than we can approach our dad.
Yes.
It's the opposite with daughters.
Well, perhaps it is because my mother was always at home, cleaning and cooking and whatever else she did, and washing. But my father was absent, going on to work, and then he did all sorts of different things to earn money to keep his family going, his growing family. So he was absent a lot of the times, although at some times we were at school and so on, but mainly when we were at home. He left early in the morning, came later on in the evening. He wasn't around as much as I'm around for my children, And so those early beginnings and the influences I had in the environment is actually what molded my outlook in sartorial art, in fashion, in style, in creating garments that are wearable, that outlast fashion.
So we have a 9-year-old Andrew who knows somewhat, because I think it's a little blurry. It's not so substantiated as it is now. So 9-year-old Andrew knows where he wants to go. What takes Andrew from Trinidad to the UK, though? How did that happen?
That's a good question. At 9, I knew I wanted to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
I used to cut up most of the newsprint and try and stick it together to create garments. I didn't have cloth, and I couldn't continue cutting up my mother's pillowcases and curtains. So, and we couldn't afford to actually buy curtains and buy pillowcases and buy sheets, bed sheets. So what my mother used to do, she would get what was flour bags, the large bags that the flour came in, and they were cotton bags, and she would acquire these cotton bags and then wash the bags, because it was brilliant white, very tightly woven cotton, because obviously the flour wouldn't fall out of the weave of the cotton. So it's very tightly woven. Those were the sheets, and those were the pillowcases, and those were the curtains. So they were very, you take a long time to acquire these pillowcases. A whole bag of flour have to be sold before you can acquire these bags. And so I couldn't continue cutting up pillowcases. I left school before age 14, when I was 13 and a half years old, having failed my exams, didn't go on to college, and served an apprenticeship. Well, they didn't say an apprenticeship, you learned a trade. And my ambition was to learn to make shirts and to learn to make pants. And so when I left school in around about June, July 1966, I then got an opportunity to learn to make pants. But before school reopened, early September in the same year, I had learned so quickly. I was making short khaki pants for other kids to go to school. I didn't get an opportunity to learn to make shirts, but I was making short khaki pants for other kids to go to school. Because I learned very, very quickly. Because tailoring to me came like a young child learning a new language, or even learning to play a musical instrument. It became natural to me, and I learned very quickly. Having learned to make pants, I then wanted to learn to make jackets. I wanted to be the complete tailor. I got an apprenticeship. I learned to make jackets, and again, in a couple of months, I was making jackets. I learned very, very, and now I'm only 14, almost 15 years old, and I'm actually able to make jackets. Saving my earnings become a part of my DNA, and I save just about every cent I earned making jackets. I used to make 3 jackets a week. working very, very long hours from 20 past 7 in the morning. I say 20 past 7 because that's was the exact time I would get in to work, and I'd work till about 9, later than 9. That still happens. I come in here on Saturday very early, and I would be the first to arrive and last to leave. And so I'm here by 7:30, I'm actually in here, and 9, 10 o'clock I leave at night. Nothing has changed. And so, because I'm emotionally connected to what I do, I don't feel as though it's hard work. I do get tired, yes, and I do have a social life. And, I like playing badminton, I enjoy playing cricket and so on. So, I do have I enjoy playing cards with my friends when we get together. So I do have a life apart from, tailoring. I had heard that Savile Row was where all the accomplished persons go to have their suits made. Where was this place? Because at that age and at that time, all we learned at school was reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I was very good at maths. I was very good at counting. I was very good at multiplication and division and so on. And so those were the basic subjects. We never did geography. Whatever little geography we did was really about Trinidad and Tobago. And it wasn't any more than where the capital was, where it was Port of Spain.
So it's up to you basically to find where UK is, where Savile Row is.
I knew by that time it was England, where England was, part of Europe, wasn't a part of what I knew. England was England. And having heard of Savile Row, I felt that like a young athlete who wanted to be in the Olympics, win a gold medal, I wanted to be on Savile Row, where the best tailors are, and practice my trade. And so having from age 14 and a half to 17 and a half, after 3 years, I saved all my money and I bought a boat ticket because I couldn't afford a plane ticket. I bought a boat ticket, and I'd like to say I sailed to Savile Row. I didn't sail to England. I didn't sail to Europe. I sailed to Savile Row because that is where my sort of like, a blinkered ambition was to be on Savile Row. And I arrived in July. No, I actually left home in July 1970, and I arrived in August 1970. I got digs in an attic room in North London, Burnham Road. I remember the address, number 20 Burnham Road, N4. There wasn't a full postcode like you had now. It was just N4. And I lived up in that attic room. I came to Savile Row. I arrived on a Saturday, and Monday morning I went looking for Savile Row.
Did you have anyone waiting for you at all in the UK?
Fortunately, I had someone waiting in London. So when I arrived in Southampton, I navigated my way to, I think it was Waterloo. And there was someone there who was arranged to meet me there. He and his brother, 2 young students from Trinidad, actually, met me there and helped me away to North London. They lived in the same house down. They had the apartments, they had the flats in the same building. And that's where, that's how I actually got in.
But that's only, we can say, the beginning. It's still the beginning. You coming all the way from Trinidad to Savile Row didn't solve everything immediately. Can you talk to me about that period of adversity to try and establish yourself within Savile Row, getting your value recognized as a skilled tailor?
Well, I got a job immediately not exactly in the street of Savile Row. Savile Row is a very short street, actually. It was on Conduit Street, obliquely opposite the entrance to the end of Savile Row. I would say the top end of Savile Row. A company there employed me straight away because he liked the suit I was wearing. I had made myself 2 suits as my calling card. I used one to travel here, and I carried the other one. And he liked what I had because I, take my suit around. And he was the first. Actually, Anthony Sinclair was the name of the tailor, and he was Sean Connery's tailor. He was James Bond tailor, and James Bond had his suit made in Savile Row. And when I got that first opportunity, it's when I began to experience, without realizing it, experienced adversities, experienced challenges, experienced being turned down, experienced being told, no, you can't come in here. I got that job because there was a sign outside in the window. I think it was tailor wanted or coat maker wanted. I don't recall exactly what the sign was. Because, you know, if you wanted a tailor, you didn't advertise in media, newspapers. You didn't advertise. You had a sign out in the window, or you communicate with other tailors, you know, when we're looking for someone. So if anyone should come in and ask, you know, send them along. And Anthony Sinclair gave me a job. He said, you can start next Monday. And I went in dutifully next Monday to start work at Anthony Sinclair.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, this is where you'll be working. But while I was waiting for Mr. Sinclair, another guy came in and he saw that sign. And so now two of us are actually waiting there. I'm ready to start work. He's coming in for an interview. He's a little bit younger than I am. He's looking for an apprenticeship. He's not a tailor. I was shown the station where I would work while Mr. Sinclair went back downstairs and to speak to this young man. Then he came back upstairs and he said to me, have you used an iron like this? And I said, no, I haven't used an iron like this because, of course, if you plug an iron in, it gets hot, right?
Yeah.
And I said, no, I haven't used one like this. I've used an iron for 3-4 years prior to that, but it wasn't exactly the same. So I ought to have said yes. But I think on reflection, I said the right thing. I said, no, I haven't. But what Mr. Sinclair said is, if you haven't used an iron like this, you can't work here.
It's quite a peculiar question he asked. Did he ask this for a purpose?
Yes.
Did he want you to resign? I don't understand the dynamic.
He wanted to get rid of me.
He wanted
And he
to get rid
couldn't
of you.
think of any reason to get rid of me. So, you know, he used the flimsiest of reasons. But he did me a great favor. And that's why I think I said the right thing by saying no. He was clearly, I would say, embarrassed by saying you can't work here and give this other guy, Richard, the position.
You didn't understand this in the moment, or
I didn't
thought
understand it.
the other person was more skillful. This is what you thought. The other person is better than
I
you.
wasn't even thinking about Richard being favored. It was later on I discovered that was the reason.
Mm-hmm.
I really, what happened was that he said that I'll see if I can find you another job. And so he called around a very good friend of his called Jim Welshman, whose shop was in Savile Row. I think it was number 33 Savile Row. And Jim Welshman said, yes, I'll have a word with him. Went over with the two suits, one I was wearing, the other one I was carrying. And Jim Welshman looked him over, he looked at the sleeve, particularly at the collar. He liked what he saw. He said, did you make this? I'm 17 years old. It isn't possible that you made these two jackets. And I said, yes, I did. I made the trousers as well. And he said, have you got a machine at home? Because you could work for me at home. And I said, no, I haven't. I'd only been in the country a few days, basically.
Yeah.
And I said, I haven't got a machine at home. And Welshman had a very, very small shop, so he didn't have space to accommodate any tailors. He only used outworkers. And he said, well, look, I'll try and get you someplace else. And he called up Huntsman's, almost directly opposite to where his shop was. Spoke to Mr. Hammack at Huntsman's. Mr. Hammack says, yes, I'll see him. I went over to Huntsman. And that was about, I think it was about 20 past 10. I was fired just after 9 o'clock, and by 20 past 10, I was given a job at Huntsman that I started immediately. I was just shown the back room, shown the space I was going to work, and I was in a section of facings, doing lapels.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I started work, at Huntsman's, doing lapels and facings. But they had a sectionalized system. One person did the pockets, another person made up the canvases, another person padded the collar, padded the lapels, another person actually did the canvassing. And so they had a sectionalized system, almost like a conveyor belt system.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the section where you turned the facing and created a lapel. That was the first First job I had in Savile Row.
And I remember I've read that you had to come through Head Street. Couldn't directly go into the enhancements, right? Is that right?
That's correct.
And it's so much adversity you've been through as well. So to work for Maurice Sedwell, for instance, you had to change your name from Madan to Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
You were told we can't call you that year. And nowhere have I read that you got aggravated, maybe raised your voice. How were you going through that adversity? Was it the dream that kept you going through all that?
Interesting question, because I didn't recognize it as adversity. When I went in on a Tuesday morning to Huntsman to continue work, I went in through Savile Row. And Mr. Hammock looked at me and said, "You can't come in here." And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm being fired again. Because, having had that experience the day before at Anthony Sinclair, I thought that I was gotten rid of again. It turned out, he said, "You can't come in here because you come in at the back entrance." So he said, I had no idea where the back entrance was. He says, "You go through the door, turn left, walk along Savile Row." I don't know London. I got to find out from the tube station, really, to Savile Row. That was all I knew. I knew the Piccadilly line from Finsbury Park down to Piccadilly Circus, walk up Regent Street, find Savile Row.
You had
That's
zero idea
all
what
I
was
knew.
telling you.
I didn't know anything. I later on got an A to Z, which was the London map, the modern day, Google map.
Yeah.
Or a latter day model, Google Maps. But at that time, when he said to me, "Walk along, go along Savile Row, along Burlington and Vigo Street, up Regent Street, into Head Street, and you'll find an entrance there," it was, to me, I don't know where the heck was I going to go. It was a long way. In my mind, it was a long way, not very far away. But I am no more than just a few feet away from where my workstation was, at the back of the building. But I had to do that full round to get in. I didn't understand. It's because, staff, people who work here is not allowed. I mean, customers allowed to come into the front of the shop. So I didn't regard that first challenge as adversity, as racism, or any such thing. I didn't recognize racism. I came from Trinidad. I didn't know what racism was.
It's foreign to you completely.
It wasn't part of my vocabulary. I didn't understand what it was at all. But at Huntsman's, I was in the back row, and I became ambitious because I was working on, I've been heard of Savile Row, all the known persons that are coming to Savile Row to have their suits made, especially Huntsman, the biggest tailors in the world. And I'm seeing their names, and I'm working on their clothes. I want to be a part of the front of the shop, of course. While I'm coming into the back of the shop, going up to the 6th floor to do sewing. And I wanted to be at the front shop. And so I thought, if I really wanted to get ahead on Savile Row, I have to learn a few things. I have to learn the cutting, the fitting, the tailoring. And the only way I can do that is to attend tailoring college. And so I worked part-time on a Saturday job. I saved the money I was earning at Huntsman. I decided to leave that job because I was only earning £12 a week. And I had a Saturday job that was earning £6 a week. £6 on a Saturday. And so I left that job, and I worked full-time at that job that I was getting £6 to be paid £35 a week. Huge amount. 3 times the amount I was earning. And I saved everything. Saving became a part of my DNA. And I saved as much as I could. And I went on to the London College of Fashion, the University of the Arts. And I did engage in a 3-year degree in tailoring. Tailoring included pattern drafting, cutting and fitting. It included tailoring, of course, making garments. But what was important, it had one module in the course was business studies. And that was an important part of that course, that I actually was learning the rudiments of business. After the first year, the principal called me into the office. 15 students starts in the first year. 10 get selected for the second year, and then 8 for the final year. And when I started, after the first year at London College of Fashion, the principal, a very fine gentleman called Mr. Clark, called me into the office. And he said to me, you know, we start with 15 students and we select 10 for the second year and then 8 for the final year. And this is me. He has this interview with every student. And I'm now thinking, is that Huntsman experience, that play experience going to happen again? But Mr. Clark said something to me that I was not prepared for. He said to me that if you could complete a 3-year degree in 2 years, I will skip you the second year and put you at one of the 8 in the third year. And that's exactly what happened. That was music to my ear, because I felt I'm now saving 1 year's school fee of £900. I could have bought a house with 3 years school fee of 27.
Give us a perspective as well of how much the £900 was.
£900, I could have made a deposit on a house for around about £400. And I could have bought a house, because I was earning £35 a week before. I could have bought a house for about £3,000–4,000. I could have bought a detached house for about £3,000 or £4,000. In fact, later on, I bought a house for £9,750. You know,
Nowhere near
my first house, and I was just about 22 years old.
Yeah.
23 years old, I bought that house. Now, I went on to the third year. I completed a 3-year degree in 2 years. I made lots of suits, lots and lots and lots of suits during that time. By that time, I was developing a custom base. Other students used to get this guy to make their suits, because they had customers. We were encouraged to have customers, which is a great thing. We were encouraged to have customers, so we were making suits and making lots and lots of suits and overcoats and so on.
Yeah. So every time in the history, for instance, the hero, okay, there's a pivoting point for any hero. Can you talk to me about that point where you went from the shadows, basically, up to having your skill as a tailor being acknowledged, and then you started your journey of impact?
Mm-hmm. I think perhaps that happened in college. In my first year at the London College of Fashion, after completing that degree, that first year, and giving that opportunity by Mr. Clark to miss the second year, and then go on to the final year, being one of 8. Now, the final year, 8 students graduate, coming into Savile Row in the city of London, looking for a job. The world's your oyster, because there are around 45, actually once I counted 45 tailors in and around Savile Row, the West End city. I counted 45 tailors that I could get a job. The pendulum had swung in my career pathway by that time. Having spent almost 7 years doing tailoring, sewing, making garments, I wanted to be at the front of the shop. I wanted to meet and rub shoulders with those whom I've heard about, those whose clothes I was making or working on in the back room at Huntsman's.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to design. I wanted to be a part of the real action. So I said to Mr. Clark that I want to get a job as an undercutter. The undercutter is the guy who actually cuts the pattern, gets an opportunity to fit the suits and so on. And so with that in mind, actually, Mr. Clark created a diploma of distinction for me. And so I got my diploma. I had new suits made, now coming on to Savile Row, looking for a job as an undercutter. I had 11 appointments.
That was in 1974.
1974.
When you came back.
Yes, July 1974.
Was it any easier to get a job at Savile Row after all that and the distinguished diploma had acquired?
it was a real challenge because every appointment I had, they would turn me down. They would turn me down because I did not fit the profile of a front of shop person or assistant cutter or undercutter. I would get offers as a tailor to work in the back room. And one tailor actually said to me, our customers wouldn't take kindly to a foreigner, but if you wanted a job in the back room, you can join us. I didn't. I really wanted to be at the front of the shop. So I would go back to Mr. Clark at every appointment and say, well, I didn't get a job, I didn't get a job. Even the company I had a 2-week internship promised me a job when I was completing my degree. They turned me down as well because I didn't want to continue as a tailor. I wanted to be at the front. Having been turned down, I would go back to Mr. Clark and not complain, but say, well, I wasn't successful. I never knew. I didn't understand racism at all.
Even at that point, you didn't understand it.
No, I didn't. I'm in the country now for almost 4 years, and I didn't recognize it. And even when that tailor said to me, our customers wouldn't take kindly to a foreigner, I accepted. Well, that's the case. That
these are the rules to play with.
Yeah, I didn't think that was a problem. That's the way it is. It wasn't a big issue for me. I would go back to Mr. Clark. He would probably knew the depth of the extent of racism, but I didn't understand it at all. After everyone was placed, all but one other person, Braxton Phillips was his name. I think he was from Bermuda. Braxton went back home. But I said to Mr. Clark, I didn't get the job. Everyone was placed. I didn't know quite what I was going to do. I probably would have gone back to Trinidad if I didn't get the job that I wanted.
So you considered going back? Actually?
That was the alternative. Because my student visa was going to expire that year. I can't get a work permit. I had applied for a work permit before, actually, and I was turned down, and I was given 2 weeks to leave the country. I remember there was a red line underlining 10th of October. It was 1972.
You still remember the date?
Yeah,
exact
10th
day
of October 1972. I was given 2 weeks to leave the country. And that was, that I would have had to go back home. And so now we're in 1974, we're 2 years later. The alternative was to go back home to get a work permit. I hadn't considered any means I would be successful at all. In fact, Huntsman did apply for a work permit for me as well. They didn't tell me the result of that because I think I might have left before if it was turned down. They didn't say. But I was working illegally at Huntsman. I was not allowed to work. So they could have paid me that £12 a week from then until I retire. I couldn't complain, especially because I was working illegally. I was here on a visitor's visa. And so what actually transpired is that Mr. Maurice Sedwell, after everyone was placed, he called up the college and asked if they've got any students looking for a job. And Mr. Clark said, yes, we've got one person. I came down to Mr. Sedwell that very day. I still have the piece of paper that said Maurice Sedwell, 910 Savile Row, 734-0824 as a phone number. I still got that little bit of paper at the back of a letter, a used paper. And I came down to Mr. Sedwell and I got a 4-week trial on the 22nd of July 1974.
But you were still not in the front where you wanted to be. How did that came to be at Mr. Sedwell?
Mr. Sedwell had a very interesting background in that he had first went to a company called Bowring and Orendale looking for an apprenticeship there, and he was told by Mr. Orendale at the time that the sewing machine had been invented, it's becoming increasingly in use, so there isn't a future in tailoring. He should do something else. He didn't take that advice. He decided, yeah, I want to be a tailor. He learned, and in 1938 he actually started his own business in Fleet Street, and he had a break during the war. He had an opportunity during the war in the Navy to travel the world. Mr. Sedwell had been open to other cultures. He'd been around a bit, and he gave me an opportunity as an undercutter. But I spent more time doing alterations for Mr. Sedwell than I did any kind of cutting or drafting of trouser patterns or any such thing. I say trouser patterns because I wouldn't get to touch jackets. And he began to call me the doctor, because I wasn't aware that it was an alias. The alteration tailor's alias was the doctor, because the doctor fixed things. He put things right. And I was the doctor, so he would bring stuff for me to do. But what was a real problem for me at the time was that I wanted to do undercutting. I wanted to meet the customers. And I found a real difficulty in really being subjected to that room that was about the width of a table, which was about 30 inches, and then another 30 inches of space. So I had 6 to 5 feet, 5 feet by around 6 feet long. That was the space that I was working. And I resented it. I resented it because I wasn't getting the opportunity that I wanted to. But what I did not really realize, and I would have been appreciative of, that getting that opportunity to fix garments that was really wrong when they were made was a learning opportunity that I had in taking garments apart, putting it back together again, and fitting the customer and taking it away. And there were mainly problems with the shoulders, or the pitch of the sleeve, and some of the balance of the sleeve wasn't right. So there were big alterations, taking off the collar, taking off the shoulders, taking off the sleeves, doing a correction, putting it back together again. And I was really learning the real foundation of tailoring. I'd learned to make garments, but not to take it apart and put it together again. I was putting it together fresh, but not actually taking apart fittings that weren't up to scratch, fixing it, putting it back together again. I was learning a lot, but I still resented it because I didn't appreciate that I was learning. And I said to Mr. Sedwell, there's such a lot of alterations. Can I have a look at the fittings? So if I have a look at the fittings, then perhaps we will address the situation we're having with alterations. And he said, yeah, you can have a look, stand at the door, but don't interfere. And so I would stand at the door and look on, and then he and I would have a conversation afterwards, because he wasn't doing the fittings. His managing director was doing the fittings. Mr. Sedwell was exceptional as a salesman. He would communicate to the customer, he would take their measurements, he would sell. But he would not, I've never seen Mr. Sedwell fit a jacket or a suit. And so I would look on and I would make my comments about the fitting, and he would let me do what I want to do. He would actually let me, allow me to. And then he started to blow my trumpet with customers, tell them, this guy should be doing your fittings. And then one day, a customer called up and asked what my name was. And he said, whenever I come back to your establishment, I want you to do I want Andrew to do my fittings.
So that is the pivoting point.
That was a pivoting point,
Yes.
because that gentleman, his name is Mark Lennox Boyd. He was PPS to Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister. And he was in a pretty influential position. He then recommended Peter Rees. Peter Rees was the finance secretary, I think. And Mr. Rees came in, and Mr. Rees is about 5'6", slightly stooping, and he stood up and said, "I am told I should see Andrew Ramroop." Can you imagine? I had read about him in the paper. I had seen pictures of him in the newspaper, and suddenly he's coming and wants to see me. And Mr. Sedwell is at the front of the shop. The managing director is at the front of the shop, and I'm in that little room in the back doing my alterations. And he wanted to see me.
So they saw that. They saw that he asked for you specifically.
Yeah. And I remember Mr. Sedwell literally patting me on the shoulder and said, next time Mr. Lennox boy comes in, he wants to see you. Because he called up and asked what my name was. Because I had fitted his suit in the absence of Maurice Sedwell and his managing director. They were out to lunch or whatever it is, and when Mark Lennox boy came in and fitted his suit, he was happy with it. And there's a long story with that really convinced him that I was the one. And that story was that he used another tailor on Savile Row. And he was unhappy. That's why he moved to us. And he had exactly the same problem with our suit he was having with the other tailor. And I fixed it. And he asked to see me, then recommended. And at one time I had 6 cabinet ministers coming to see me at Maurice Sedwell. I began to do most of the cutting, most of the fitting, and the managing director had literally nothing to do because no one would allow him to look after them.
It's astounding how you go from being at the back room to proving yourself, like really proving yourself. How did you feel in the moment when you saw that, okay, I'm taking this responsibility, Mr. Sedwell likes it? Something that's way more interesting is the clients love it. So I can actually have what I dreamt when I left Trinidad. How did you feel?
Well, you know, that feeling came a lot later when I acquired the business, because I was just getting on with life, doing what I do to the best of my ability, I didn't see anyone as competition. I saw myself.
Even back then?
Yes.
Nobody was in competition?
No one I didn't see as a competition. I saw myself as a competition. I used to look at my own work, critique my own work, be critical of my own work, be critical of the tailors that was working for Maurice Sedwell, making suggestions of how they should do things. Because Maurice Sedwell only employed out workers, same as Jim Welshman, and a lot of the tailors employed only out workers. And that's one of the reasons, quite apart from the fitting, one of the reasons why there was just such a lot of alterations. Because it was a situation of like the tail wagging the dog. Because tailors would do whatever they want to do, because they were out workers working in their own premises. You didn't see how the garments were made. But I had knowledge and experience of how garments were made. And when I was taking them apart to put them together again, I would see how they were put together. And I became notorious because I would complain about how garments are being made. And I was still very, very young, younger than all of the other tailors. All the tailors who were working for Maurice Sedwell, trouser makers, waistcoat makers, jacket makers. I was critical of their work. And I became like, you know, I wasn't unpleasant, but I became a very difficult person to work for. And so I tried to leave Maurice Sedwell. I tried to leave Maurice Sedwell actually 3 times, and he wouldn't let me leave. And at the final time I tried to leave, it was in 1988.
Where you bought?
When I bought the company. Because I said to Mr. Sedwell, look, I really want to leave and start my own business and do my own thing. And because I feel that, you know, I can do things differently. I can do things better. And he said to me that if you can raise the funds to buy the business, then that's what you should do. And then everyone else should leave, including himself. And that's exactly what happened.
So you were able to buy the entire business in 1988 or a percentage of it?
Maurice Sedwell decided to keep 10% and I bought 90%. So I had 90% of the business, well, more or less, the entire business. We became incredibly busy. First of all, I started by redecorating the shop. We had what was really a confusion of the front of the shop and at the back and that little room I had. I literally ripped that. We only had 500 square feet of space, 550 square feet of space. I literally emptied it, redecorated, created a small showroom, a small office, a fitting room, and a workroom with an island table so we can have people working all around the island, and reorganize it completely. And I became incredibly busy, really, really, really busy, much busier than we were before, to the extent that I had to take other premises on Savile Row. And so I took premises at number 8 Savile Row. We were at number 9, 10. I took premises on the top floor, and I had a workroom there where I had tailors there, and then I had tailors at number 9 as well. So the business was flourishing, it was growing. I outgrew the premises because, again, even though Maurice Sedwell used out workers, and I got rid of everyone except one. I got rid of one guy, 2 persons. I kept George and I kept Paul Panayotu, the 2 Greek guys. I kept them, got rid of everybody else, and I did a lot of the work myself. I did the cutting, I prepared the fitting, I did the cleaning, I did the vacuuming of the floor. You know, I swept, I did wash the coffee cup, I did just about everything.
So the ownership didn't change you at all?
Oh no.
You were still down to the nitty-gritty, acting as an employee. I'm sorry, not as an employer.
Well, indeed, I was an employee. I still am an employee of Maurice Sedwell. You know, not much has changed in my own personality in what I did. One of the things that I learned from Maurice Sedwell at that time, we had to calculate national insurance contributions. We had to calculate the tax. There's these books you had to do cross section and so on. And I was doing so much office work for him that I was learning to run the business without realizing. And when I talked about a resentment, I resented having to do that. I resented having to do the alterations. But you know what? I was learning to run a business and I did not appreciate that. I would have to go to the bank, deposit the cash or the checks, because there was no credit card. And I would have to withdraw the cash and then put the cash and put the amount and the taxation and put it in an envelope to pay the workers. I had to do just about everything that's involved. Maurice said we will roll in about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning. He would leave early, come in late and leave early. I was running the business because the MD is the one who was doing the tailoring, the cutting and the fitting. And then I began to get more involved, and then I began to do everything. This is why he was so idle. He just didn't have anything to do. He literally stand with his foot on the windowsill, smoking and looking through the window. And I was doing all the work, but he was happy about that because I was doing the work and he was collecting a salary. And being paid more than I was. And that's when I said to Mrs. Sedwell, look, I really want to go out and do my own thing. But I think the biggest fear was at that time is that I would probably leave and the customers would follow me. I think that was one of the biggest fears. And if that happened, then the business would have folded up. But I took a decision that it was better to buy an ongoing business with a reputation than to start my own business new as Maurice Sedwell Ltd. Or as Andrew Ramroop. Not Maurice Sedwell Ltd, but to start a business new as Andrew Ramroop. Especially with a name like that, because prior to that, when I came, my name is Madan, M-A-D-A-N, Madan. And when first thing I said, my name is Madan Ramroop. He said, we can't call you that. Do you have any other name? I was baptized as Andrew Edward Madan Ramroop, as a Presbyterian. And I said, well, call me Andrew because I'm baptized as Andrew. And I became Andrew in July 1974, officially. Well, I say officially.
How did you feel it's part of your name, but it changes your identity, the one you were used to be called as, like Madan. That's your name. How did you feel?
I didn't feel anything.
Nothing.
No. It was the same. The feeling was the same as being turned down for a job, being turned down at every interview. It was the same. I did not feel any different. Okay, if it's not Madan, it's Andrew, and I'm happy with that. I accepted.
Did you feel you had to sacrifice some pieces to get where you want to go?
Well, I suppose to if we describe it in percentage terms, it would be a small percentage of that I've got to give my name up. But it was a fact of life that that's what I have to do to get ahead and to do what I'm doing to work here. Well, I'm going to do it. I bear no resentment at all because it would help me. Mr. Sedwell will be happy to call me Andrew. I'm equally happy to be referred to as Andrew.
And from that point on, you went on to design garments for a lot of well-known personalities, among which was the Princess of Wales, Diana, the very famous Panorama interview in 1995, where we designed her midnight blue jacket. Did you know that your creation was going to be put on national television?
Well, the short answer to that is no.
No.
Because I remember, I spoke about Peter Rees before. I remember seeing Peter Rees on a television, not television, I saw him on a newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And he had his legs folded, but his trousers reached all the way up above his calves, and his socks were showing, so much of his socks was showing. And when he came in, I mentioned to him that I think perhaps we should do something about the stride on your trousers. So when you raise your leg like this, the trousers wouldn't rise as much. I don't think he responded, but he said, so you never know where the garments that you make, where they're going to end up, where it's going to be seen. Mm-hmm. So the format with the Princess of Wales, she'll go to Catherine Walker, her designer, and Catherine Walker would get the brief, and she would have to produce 3 designs, and then it'll get selected about which would be made. It's interesting you would say that it's in midnight blue. It was midnight blue. It looks black.
It looks black.
It's very, very, very dark blue. It's actually midnight blue. We say 5 minutes to midnight. It was midnight. I made 8 suits for the Princess of Wales, which was wonderful. I mean, that length of cloth, that houndstooth length of cloth, is one remaining from one of the suits I made. You don't know, they end up in lots of places that most people want to know about the Princess of Wales, but I'm feel humbled to be chosen to tailor garments for those that I had dreamt about coming to Savile Row to meet, to rub shoulders with, to take their measurements, to be involved in creating their look. I mean, I feel very humbled about that. I remember when Susan George, she was a very well-known actress at the time, and I think it was reputed to be dating Prince Charles. When she first came in, I mean, I kind of trembled in her presence because I knew about her, but to have her come in and sit down and actually, literally in one of these chairs, and me having a conversation with her, that I remember clearly being uncomfortable because I didn't expect to see anyone like her in my studio. When Charles Gray, who played Blofeld in Diamonds Are Forever, and he played, I think, Mr. Henderson in From Russia with Love,
mm-hmm.
the Bond movie, when he came in and he wanted me to do his fitting, and when he invited me to his apartment and invited me out for a drink, I felt uncomfortable. When these people come, I tell you what, when a well-known name you probably don't know about, Hollywood star Tony Curtis.
Of course I know him.
When Tony Curtis came in, and I was dressing him for a movie, he was very unhappy about what was being made for the movie. He was very unhappy with the wardrobe. So then I had to call down the director, the producers, just about everyone involved into the studio. And Mr. Curtis, what do you think you should wear? He pointed to me and he said, I want a suit exactly like he's wearing. That is what I should be wearing. And I thought, what? And when I got into the studio where he was actually filming the scene, he held me by the arm from his dressing room, took me into the studio, sat me in his chair, introduced me to everyone. I had done his fitting in his lounge, in his dressing room, and then I saw him film a part for a movie. Now, I was still uncomfortable. I mean, it's big names, some Hollywood stars. But it was what my dream was. But it was just gradually coming together without me saying, yes, I have arrived. I always felt like I was still very much on my way.
I still believe you are. Still believe you think you are your way.
Absolutely.
So it's quite peculiar because there's a lot of people who like reach their dream, they try to touch it a little bit, and they instantly become excited. But you are quite settled, you are calm through the process. You're more nervous about the end result and satisfying the client. And you're not as nervous about yourself. Okay, I have this moment, I'm not living this for myself though, I have to focus, I have work to do, job is not done. But your impact doesn't stop in making garments for royal family and these personalities, it goes way, way beyond that. So you have your own academy, the Savile Row Academy. You have your own bespoke curriculum, arts, under Ramroop Tailoring Standards. Can you talk to me about these two, how they came to be?
It's interesting that you should ask that question of how they came to be. I am very much an action person. I'm a working person when I say action. I had joined the Master Craftsmen's Association, which was the only tailoring association on Savile Row. And the Master Craftsmen's Association, we had 39 companies that were members. I became very active. Eventually they elected me as president because I was one that would come in with ideas, feed in ideas, said we should be thinking about this, doing that, this is how we should grow. And I put in as much energy with the Master Craftsmen's Association. The full name was the Master Craftsmen's Association and Retail Export Group. And when they selected me or elected me as president, I thought a lot of what I've been discussing with the committee and the membership will be, now there's a chance to put those into action. But I became president only just as a figurehead, but not, it's like the king or the president of some countries, the prime ministers that really have the power, not the king. And so I would be the king, but without any power. And I could not, for the love of money, get an agreement to provide training for tailors. And I wanted on the agenda formalized training. I wanted us as a collective to offer guaranteed apprenticeships to London College of Fashion graduates.
You wanted to give back?
I wanted to give back. Because at that time, one of the jobs I was offered was to teach full-time at the London College of Fashion. I turned it down. And I took a part-time position. I taught Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays and evenings at the London College of Fashion. And so my passion was to sharing knowledge, sharing experience. And if we could give those students guaranteed internship, then we will be building a workforce for the future. For 6 years, I was president. And every year at the luncheon meeting, I would touch on the subject of formalized training. And I could not get agreement. And so I said, I commissioned a feasibility study on the industry. And that feasibility study proved the point I was making about the future of the industry and the need for training. And yet, I could not get the committee to agree to a formalized training. They were telling me all the reasons why it can't be done. And one of the silliest of reasons was, if you train them, they leave. But I took a view, it's better you train them and they leave, than you take them on and you don't train them.
Leave in the context of
Leave in
they
the
will
context
share their knowledge somebody else, so we don't want
There's
that.
someone else who benefit of their training. And if it's better you actually take them on, train them, and they leave, rather than you take them and you don't train them. That was my view. And so I decided after 7 years to resign as president. And I inaugurated, I registered first of all the Savile Row Academy in 2007. And on the 8th of January 2008, the year of the Beijing Olympics, I started the Savile Row Academy. I'd like to say with 8 students, but I started with 6.
And up until today, how many students have you trained in the academy?
Do you know, I have stopped counting, but through the Savile Row Academy, we have trained probably, well, certainly more than 500 tailors from 15 countries. So what initially started as training tailors, I have one of those that I started training in January 2008 that still works for us. And one of the others got married to one of the other tailors' sons at Savile Row, and one other actually started to run the bespoke section for one of the well-known brands. So they're still in and around Savile Row. And many of those whom I've trained are still working in and around Savile Row, the city, but in many, many countries and running businesses. Yeah.
It's quite astounding, and I mean, you wanted to give back because I believe Mr. Clark gave you an opportunity to work for Maurice Sedwell. Am I right in my assumption? I don't believe it stays to the point where you just give back, though, to people here. You want to give back to people from Trinidad as well. Can you tell me how a person, maybe like a kid from Trinidad, can look up to you? Is that even possible?
Well, you said give back, and sometimes
Yes.
the connotations of giving back is because you've taken something and giving it back.
I
And
agree.
but I would like to say to give instead of giving back. I say give because I don't think anyone's given anything to me, or I haven't taken anything from anyone. So I feel as though I am giving, and I'm giving from the heart. I'm giving genuinely. I'm giving multi-skilled training. I had the opportunity to share my knowledge and my experience to tailors in 15 countries so far through the Savile Row Academy. And so I went back home to Trinidad, which it's a country that I've been still connected to. I went back on holidays now and again, infrequently. But I was still connected to Trinidad. And I went back, I agreed to go back in 2017. And in early 2018, I literally went back to Trinidad to train tailors. I had 35 or 37 tailors that I was training in 2 groups on pattern cutting, fitting, diagnosis and remedy, and tailoring of garments. And that for me is very, very fulfilling. I enjoy being there so much that I decided that I'm reconnected, I'm emotionally connected to my Ireland, decided to stay. And so I like to say now, I take a plane to come to work on Savile Row instead of taking the train.
After all this time, we'll talk about the future as well. What would you say to that 17-year-old boy who wore the Northern Star to come to the UK? Now that you can touch all your dreams and more, what would you say to that boy if you were to go back?
I suppose on reflection, I would support and encourage. But for a very, very long time, the emotional suffering that I endured for many years, I would say it's not such a good idea. I would probably say that wait till you're a bit more matured and more independent, but that's in hindsight of my experience. Before you do this, because it's going to be a tough life, it's going to be a lonely life. And that's when I speak to students who come from abroad to do my course now. I empathize with the challenges that they face, and I am very humane in the way in which I communicate. I'd like to think I'm very humane in the way in which I communicate with them, because I know what they endure, what they're suffering from being homesick. But most of them know that they're going to go back home after a year. I wasn't convinced that I was going to go back home until after, 4 years.
Completely understand, and it's so the homesickness hasn't gone away though. It hasn't gone away after so many years.
It hasn't. I have never really, even though I played cricket here, I played badminton here, amongst I would say Britishers. I have not really mentally or emotionally integrated into British society. I was so pleased last night. I went to a function at the Intercontinental Hotel in Park Lane. And I was so pleased when someone said to me, "Your accent, are you from Trinidad?" I was so happy about that, because they said they recognized me as a person from Trinidad because of the way I spoke. And that I value that enormously.
It's incredible how when you meet people from your own country, you understand them from the eyes, not even from the accent. You instantly become happy in a different country. How many years go by? So you, after so many years, you met a person. You instantly became happy. And Andrew, I want to also talk about the future as well. I know you have your autobiography coming up and a short film. Do you want to talk about that as well?
It's very interesting. I think what you probably have discovered so far, you ask me a question and I tell you a story.
Yeah.
It's very interesting how the biography and the movie script came about. I had been invited onto a BBC Radio 4 program called Desert Island Discs. And I was really surprised that I would be asked to be in Desert Island Discs, because they usually have known persons, famous persons. And I was sandwiched, I was sandwiched between Adele and Kate Moss. I mean, that's a great sandwich to be in. But on Desert Island Disc, I thought they were doing research on whether they should consider someone like myself for the program. But they had already done their research and made their mind up. What they were doing is interviewing me. But I did not know they were interviewing me. And I was in Trinidad, of course. And telephone call, then a Zoom call, and then I came to London. And whenever they tried to give me dates, I was never available. I was in Trinidad. And eventually, we agreed on a date that I can attend the studio. So by that time, we had maybe four hours of what was really interviews. But what they were doing is accumulating content to pass on to Lauren Devane, so that she has, as though she knew me when I got into the studio for the recording. The recording was almost 2 hours, I think, which they edited down to 45 minutes, including the music. So it's really an autobiographical account of my life. But a lot happened after Desert Island Discs. Professor Henry Louis Gates at Harvard University, whom someone had actually sent in the link of the program, and he heard it, and he approached me to write my autobiography. So we've spent about 30 hours of interviews. Currently, the interviews are being transcribed, and then, a manuscript will find its way. And hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood, that that in that anniversary year, which would be July 22nd, 2024 to 25, hopefully in that year we'd find a publisher that wants to take the risk on me. But one of the interesting things that happened, I had 3 persons that approached me about writing a film script. One was from Britain. The second one was also from Britain, but had his foundation in Hollywood. And he said, 2 of the 3 wrote to me and said, if you would ever consider having a film done, we'd like to be involved. And I remember about an old Glenn Campbell song. There's a line that says, I get cards and letters from people I don't even know. I tell you, Desert Island Discs really changed the narrative of how people recognize this guy who is a tailor on Savile Row. Because I still get cards and letters and visits and emails from people I don't even know. And I really appreciate those, because there was no way of, via the program, directly of knowing how to get in touch with me. Those who listened to the program, they would make an effort to Google my name, or Google Maurice Sedwell, or Google Savile Row Academy, and they'll find me, and they'll make an effort to write to me, and I really appreciate those. Now, I'm telling you a story here. The one person, Oliver Reichhardt, didn't write to me and say, I want to write a movie for the script of your life. He literally turned up without calling, without making an appointment. He just literally turned up and rang the doorbell. And we are on a first floor. We're by appointment only. And he came in.
He just came in the door.
He literally came in. And he said, I'd like to write a movie script on your life, because I heard it as a Desert Disc and I think it'll make a great movie. And I said yes on the spot to Oliver, because he showed initiative. He showed up. And I recall giving a lecture at the University of the Arts graduation ceremony. And I presented 3 or 4 rhetorical questions about, you are all the same age, you're all the same qualification, you're from the same background, and there's one job going. Which amongst you will get that job? And I presented, there were 4 rhetorical questions. And amongst the 4 was the guy who literally turns up and says, here I am. Not the one who sent an email. Not the one who sent an email and made a phone call. Not the one who sent an email and expected to get a response. It's the one who literally turned up and said, here I am. I'd like to work for you. Give me a chance.
It's as we said, you recognize people who show up, actually show up.
Absolutely.
Show up and I will give you what you want.
Yeah. So Oliver's actually written the screenplay. It's been accepted by a film company. And so they're currently in the process of making this happen.
It's going to happen in the same interval, I assume, July of 2024 to 2025.
I think that's a very short time to make a movie. It's going to be, I am one of the joint, there's an executive director of the film, but I'm very much into facts and reality. Probably is not that sexy, but I want to be involved, so I think I'm going to be, I've been told that I will be one of the executive directors of the movie. And so my part, I think, would be, it'll be probably one of the finest dressed movie stars in because I'm going to dress them
101%.
I'm doing the wardrobe. And I'm going to, the factual parts of it, I want to be really, really involved with, because I do not believe in the creativity of how some of these things can be misinterpreted. My brief to Oliver is that I really, and even to Professor Gates, Professor Gates is the director of the African American faculty at Harvard University, African American research at Harvard. And he's got more than 200 books credited to his name. And I'm delightful and really, really happy that he actually approached me to do my autobiography. So having the biography come out, and perhaps I think the movie will change because to some extent, because the script and the biography, there's some differences in the two that I think we would need to include in the script.
And as far as Maurice Sedwell for the future, after 2023, what are you seeing when you look into the future or when you consider it?
That's such a good question, George, because, and it's so wonderful having this conversation with you.
Absolutely.
The future. If I look back on 50 years at Maurice Sedwell, I don't know where that 50 years went. I don't know what a 50-year-old feels like. So it went like that. You know, it went very, very quickly for me on reflection. Now, I'd like to, I'm 71 in a few weeks. I'd like to think that I'll live till 120, and I probably will. I feel good, I feel very healthy, I'm still very sharp, I'm still very, very, very interested. In fact, I'm a lot more excited about my work now than I think I was in the earlier days, because I was building a career, I had responsibilities and so on. Still have those responsibilities, but I'm not building a career anymore. I've got an established career. What does the future hold for Maurice Sedwell? I have very often been asked, why haven't you changed your name and called it Andrew Ramroop? I've been encouraged, actually, actively encouraged. It should be your name. And I said, my interest is to build a brand that is synonymous with quality and service. It has some real pedigree. Mr. Sedwell gave me a chance. And I said, if you go to Harrods, you don't want to see Mr. Harrods. It's a reputation. If you go to Marks and Spencer, you don't want to see Mr. Spencer. It's the reputation of the brand. And if you go to any of the top brands, you wouldn't go to see Mr. Versace, whom incidentally, in the February of the year that he was assassinated or killed or murdered, if you like, he came to me to make him a tweed jacket. Do you know it was never made? He died that year. And you won't go to see these persons because it's the reputation that they've built with the brand. And that is, for me, the future of Maurice Sedwell, is to build it into a luxury brand with the pedigree, with the foundation from that embryonic stage where Maurice Sedwell started as a bespoke tailor, that he built this reputation, and I've taken over, and I can just literally carry on the baton, and then perhaps a future owner will build it into a luxury brand and produces just about everything that's luxurious for both men and women. You'll probably be able to get lovely leather shoes, knitwear, shirts. At the moment, the only thing you can get ready to wear at Maurice Sedwell is a necktie. And this tie I'm wearing is purely coincident. It was not planned. It was not, I swear, it was not planned.
You're a very calculated person. I wouldn't doubt it.
This tie is almost 50 years old.
No way.
This tie is almost 50 years old. When we moved from number 9 Savile Row in 1993-94 to number 19 Savile Row, this was one of the ties I designed when we were at number 9 Savile Row. We were 28 years at number 19 Savile Row, and during the COVID period, things happened. We couldn't continue to be there. The shop was closed. Then we moved from 550 square feet. I didn't even touch on that subject. We moved from 550 square feet of space on the first floor of number 9 Savile Row to 2,000 square feet of space at number 19. Now we move back to the first floor by appointment only to number 9 Savile Row. But this time we've got 1,800 square feet of space on the first floor. And this tie has a label. It actually has a label that says 910 Savile Row.
They have a date as well.
I didn't put a date because I took the tie off the rack. I didn't put a date on it. But this tie actually goes back to all those years. Why am I talking about the tie?
It's incredible you can carry your creations also with you, basically, that you can remember these days.
Yes.
And I want to close this, Andrew, with a question that I asked you in our previous interview. How do you want to be remembered?
Goodness.
How do you want to be remembered?
You know, it's interesting you should talk about, I remember about these things. For me, I am more interested in creating style and elegance that outlasts fashion. This looked like a fashion, you know, but it's style. Style is an expression of your individuality, your personality, your lifestyle, your career. That for me is what dressing in sartorial art is all about. In sartorial art, we're taking a flat piece of cloth and sculpting a three-dimensional object with it, that you can take this piece of art and portray this art out into the world. So to answer your question, to be remembered, is to share a person who was known for not being selfish in sharing the secrets of Savile Row. Sharing my knowledge and experiences perhaps is what I want to be remembered for, but it'll be a long time from now, I think.
I don't doubt it, and as far as the 120 years you said, I want to be there.
You will?
When we reach that point. So, Andrew, I want to thank you, sincerely thank you, for reflecting upon your journey, sharing your thoughts with us, with me. It almost feels like you are reborn, or you will be reborn in 2024, 50 years, Maurice Sedwell. And the only thing I want to wish you is health, love in your family and your life, and I'm sure you will do that. Keep pursuing excellence. I think this interview will inspire a lot of people.
You know,
it's a nice milestone.
Thank you for actually making the effort to come and see me to have this conversation.
It's my pleasure.
But something you just said that just came to mind, I hadn't thought about before. I thought about it but didn't articulate it. I have a 4-year-old son. My wife Daniela and I have a 4-year-old son named Andrew. And I sometimes say in jest that I would hope Andrew to become a master tailor. And people look at Andrew Jr. and say, oh, I thought you were a lot older than you are. I have another son. We have another son. His name is Daniel Ronaldo. And actually Andrew is Andrew Madan Ramroop. I gave him all my names.
Junior.
Junior. And Daniel Ronaldo. I've got 2 children. I've got 2 boys that I'm very, very proud of. You mentioned something that was really interesting there that prompted me to mention this. It's because I feel as though I have been born again when those boys were born. Because they've given me a new lease of exciting life. And I so enjoy them and I miss them so much when I travel that I see them every day on a video call. But I can't touch them. And I still miss them. I would be seeing them every day, more than once a day. But I don't have that. It's not tangible enough. So I miss them very much.
But you have a very powerful way that keeps you alive. They keep you alive. I can see it in your eyes. That
they keep me excited about life.
Excited about life.
Yeah.
Exactly. I couldn't put it better.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
It's
thank
my
you,
great
everybody.
pleasure. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
you.